All right, we are on Deuteronomy. We made it to chapter 19. So mine takes a break. Wow, that first section is pretty long. Mine doesn't take a break till 12. How about you all?
13.
Mine does at the end of 13.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Tony, actually what he says is pretty short here. So we want to go to 13.
Yeah, it looks long in the Bible, but it's only 13 verses.
Oh,
Kim.
mine is 13. I'm sorry, I read it wrong. Yeah,
Kim.
it does look long, but it's really not. All right, who would like to read?
Kim.
Okay, what do we? I'm sorry. I'm like, where are we? Wait a minute.
Chapter 19, 1 through 13.
Okay, 19. Cities of refuge. When the Lord your God has destroyed the nations you will displace, and when you are living in their cities and homes, you must set apart 3 cities of refuge, so that anyone who accidentally kills someone may flee to safety. Divide the country into 3 districts, with one of these cities in each district, and keep the roads to these cities in good repair. Here is an example of the purpose of these cities. If a man goes into the forest with his neighbor to chop wood, and the axe head flies off the handle and kills the man's neighbor, he may flee to one of those cities and be safe. Anyone seeking to avenge the death will not be able to. These cities must be scattered so that one of them will be reasonably close to everyone. Otherwise, the angry avenger might catch and kill the innocent slayer, even though he should not have died, since he had not killed deliberately. If the Lord enlarges your boundaries as he promised your ancestors and gives you all the land he promised, whether he does this depends on your obedience to all these commandments I am giving you today, loving the Lord your God and walking his paths, then you must designate 3 additional cities of refuge. In this way, you will be able to avoid the death of innocent people, and you will not be held responsible for unjustified bloodshed. But if anyone hates his neighbor and springs out of hiding and kills him, and then flees into one of the cities of refuge, the elders of his hometown shall send for him and shall bring him home and deliver him over to the dead man's avenger to kill him. Don't pity him. Purge all murderers from Israel. Only then will all go well with you.
Interesting. When I was in Israel, I was just thinking, I have a picture, I'm pretty sure, but in each of these cities, there was it looks like an altar. It's like a big stone, and then it had 4 horns on the corners, and that person who accidentally killed someone would run to that city and they would grab a hold of that horn. I was expecting them to say something about that here, but it must be somewhere else.
How long do they have to stay in that?
I don't know. I just remember thinking I never had heard of that when we went there. I had never heard of that. And so this is what they're talking about. It's like, it gives someone a place to stay until everybody calms down and they can weigh out.
That's what my concordance says.
What's that?
They could flee to one of the cities until he could have a fair trial. Because they said in Moses' day, the since revenge was common and swift in Moses' day, God had the Israelites set apart several cities of refuge. Anyone who claimed to have accidentally killed someone could flee to one of the cities until he could have a fair trial. Like you said, till things calm down.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the altar thing was a marker. I don't know. Maybe on the commentaries we'll talk about it. And if I think about it later, I'll look through my pictures and post a picture of it. Because it was interesting, because at first I thought, oh, it's an altar. And then I realized, then when they started telling us what it was, and it's the only one that they have. It's the only one that remains that they know of, which I thought was kind of cool.
Do they still put that into effect today?
Mm-mm. No, it's just
Yeah.
a landmark, or lost for words. It's just example. Whenever you're ready, Cindy.
Okay. 19, 1-3. See Numbers 35, 9-34 for the purpose of the cities of refuge.
Numbers 35.
9-34. And it gives the purpose of the cities.
I'll go look that up. Maybe it will say.
19:2, 3 cities. 3 cities of refuge were to be set aside in Canaan after the conquest of the land. These 3 cities west of the Jordan River were in addition to the 3 already established east of the Jordan. 19:9, add 3 more cities. If the Israelites had been faithful in following the Lord fully, then he would have enlarged their territory to the boundaries promised in the Abrahamic covenant. In that case, 3 more cities of refuge for a total of 9 would have been needed. And then that's it. It starts again at 9:14.
Do you want me to read this Numbers?
Yeah.
It says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person without intent may flee there. The cities shall be for you a refuge from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation for judgment. And the cities that you give shall be your 6 cities of refuge. You shall give 3 cities beyond the Jordan and 3 cities in the land of Canaan, be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall be for refuge for the people of Israel and for the stranger and the sojourner among them. And anyone who kills any person without intent may flee there. But if he struck him down with an iron object so that he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. And if he struck him down with a stone tool that could cause death, and he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. Or if he struck him down with a wooden tool that could cause death, and he died, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall be put to death. The avenger of blood shall himself put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death. And if he pushed him out of hatred or hurled something at him, lying in wait, so that he died, or in enmity struck him down with his hand so that he died, then he who struck the blow shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. But if he pushed him suddenly without enmity, or hold anything on him without lying in wait, or used a stone that could cause death, and without seeing him dropped it on him so that he died, though he was not his enemy and did not seek his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood in accordance with these rules. And the congregation shall rescue the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood, and the congregation shall restore him to his city of refuge to which he had fled, and he shall live in it until the death of the high priest who was anointed with holy oil. Well, that's interesting. So he has to stay in that city until the death of the high priest who was anointed with holy oil. But if the manslayer shall at any time go beyond the boundaries of his city of refuge, which he fled, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the boundaries of the city of refuge, the avenger of blood kills the manslayer, he shall not be guilty of blood. So he was safe as long as he was inside that city. For he must remain in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the manslayer may return to the land of his possession, and all these things shall be for a statute shall be for a statute and rule for you throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. If anyone kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the evidence of witnesses, but no person shall be put to death on the testimony of one witness. Moreover, you shall accept no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall be put to death. And you shall accept no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge, that he may return to dwell in the land before the death of the high priest. You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the one who shed it. You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the one who shed it. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel. That's interesting, because there we go to the importance of the blood again.
So if you did kill intentionally,
You were to be murdered.
right, but were you murdered in your refuge city or were you brought back to your original?
Well, I feel like it's saying you're brought back to your original because you're before the congregation. And then it says the land, the blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the one who shed it. So, like when Cain murdered Abel is what I was thinking about. Remember, he said the blood cried out from the earth. Now, let's see what the theologians say. Whenever you're
Ready
ready.
for Orsby?
So there's 6 cities, not 3.
Well, I thought it said 9 then.
Oh, did it?
I thought it was 3 in Canaan,
3 on the
3
Jordan.
to the west, 3 to the east. It said something about 9.
Yeah, if they obey the Lord and he expands their land, then they have to have 3 more.
Oh, okay.
9 in total, I think is what it said, Cindy. Yeah, 9 in total is what you read.
I thought it was interesting too. He says, if the
Mhm.
Lord, it was
Yeah.
based on their obedience.
If you always love the Lord your God and walk in his ways.
You shall add another 3 cities. Oh, wait a minute. It says to these 3.
There'll be 9 altogether.
Okay.
See,
Ready? Justice in the Land. The Quaker poet John Greenleaf Whittier called justice the hope of all who suffer and the dread of all who wrong. That's the ideal, but it isn't always achieved in real life. Without justice, society would fall apart and anarchy would take over, and it wouldn't be safe for people to leave their homes. Israel didn't have the elaborate police system we have today, so locating and punishing guilty criminals depended primarily on the elders and judges. By singling out the cities of refuge, the Lord promised justice in the land. The cities, and this is verses 1 to 3 and 7 to 10. Moses here reviews what he taught Israel in Numbers 35. In fact, he had already set up the 3 cities of refuge east of the Jordan. That's found in Deuteronomy 4. It would be Joshua's responsibility to set up the other 3 cities west of the Jordan after Israel had conquered the land.
Okay, so Moses set up 3 in Deuteronomy 4. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Deuteronomy 4, 42 to 43.
And then Joshua
set up 3 cities in the west, and that's found in Joshua 20.
3 cities in west
West of the Jordan.
And Moses was 3 cities.
east of the Jordan.
Okay.
Okay, those east of the Jordan are
Oh,
Golan, Golan, Ramoth,
Golan.
yeah, Ramoth, Ramoth, and Bezer, Bezer.
Okay.
On the west, they would be Kadesh,
K-A-D,
Kedesh,
K-E-D-E-S-H.
Shechem, Shechem, and Hebron, Hebron.
Okay.
If you consult a map of the Holy Land, you will see that these cities were so located that they were easily accessible to those who needed protection. The roads leading to these cities were kept in good repair and be clearly marked. Rabbinical tradition states that they were signs at all the crossroads pointing the way to the nearest city of refuge. The Lord wanted to make it easy for the innocent manslayer to escape the vengeance of angry people. The Lord also made arrangements for the nation to add 3 more cities of refuge if the borders of their land were expanded. He had promised Israel a large land, and if they obeyed his law, he would have kept his promise. It was only during the reign of David that this much territory was actually held by Israel, and then they lost it when things fell apart during Solomon's reign. If we don't obey God's will and claim God's promises, we can never receive all that God wants us to have.
So they never had the 3 more cities then, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
Well, David would have been the ruling figure, I guess, if he was the king.
Yeah.
I'm confused then why in verse 2 or 3 it says you must set apart 3 cities of refuge so that anyone who accidentally kills someone may flee to safety. Divide the country into 3 districts with one of these cities in each district, and then only if they are obedient and walk in God's paths do they enlarge and get 3 more. So how is there 6 if
Well,
they didn't get
there's 3 on the left of the Jordan, 3 on the right of the Jordan. Moses set up 3, Joshua set up 3. If they were obedient, they would have expanded the land. And he was saying, if you're obedient and do that, then you set up 3 more, but they never got there that we know of.
So if we weren't reading the additional resources that we have, we wouldn't know they were in the east and in the west, because this just says 3.
Well, I think if we go back to that, if I go back to that Numbers 35, did it say it in there?
Let
me go back.
I'll look here. Numbers 35.
9.
Cindy, what did John MacArthur say about 9? I thought you read 9 cities.
Read it somewhere.
And the Lord said to Moses, tell the people that when they arrive in the land, cities of refuge shall be designated for anyone to flee into if he has killed someone accidentally. These cities will be placed in protection from the dead man's relatives who want to avenge his death. He must be killed. Blah, blah, blah. 3 of these 6 cities of refuge are
Beyond the Jordan, and 3 in the land of Canaan.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, from what it looks like, MacArthur said that there could have been 3 more.
If they had expanded the land.
Right, but I don't saying it's saying 3 more cities of refuge for a total of 9 would have been needed.
Mm.
So apparently it wasn't needed.
in my Numbers 35:6 of down at a footnote of the 48 cities given to the Levites by the people, 6 were cities of refuge. These 6 cities were probably put under the Levites' supervision because they would be the most impartial judges.
Here it is in Deuteronomy 19, 8. It says, and if the Lord your God enlarges your territory as he has sworn to your fathers and gives you all the land that he promised to give to your fathers, provided, verse 9, you are careful to keep all his commandment, which I command you today by loving the Lord your God and walking ever in his ways, then you shall add another 3 cities to these. So that's where those extra 3 come in, but they ended up losing it.
Okay, then we move on to verses 4 to 6, the manslayer. Modern law still follows Moses in making a distinction between murderer and manslaughter. And there's references to Exodus and Leviticus. The person who unintentionally killed someone could flee to the nearest city of refuge and present his case to the elders there.
What's the Leviticus reference?
24:17.
Leviticus 24:17. Okay.
If he didn't flee, a member of the victim's family might chase him down and become the avenger of the blood and kill him. Israel had no system for locating and arresting suspected criminals. It was left to the family of the victim to see that justice was done.
Oh.
The avenger of blood wasn't given authority to act as judge, jury, and executioner. He was only to hand the accused over to the proper officers. But if this relative was angry, he might take the law in his own hands and kill an innocent man. By fleeing to the city of refuge, the manslayer was safe until the facts of the case would be examined and the verdict declared. If found innocent, the manslayer was allowed to live safely in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. Even though he was innocent, he still paid a price for accidentally killing another human being. If he left the city of refuge, his life was in danger and the elders couldn't protect him.
That's kind of like jail. I mean, you had to stay in that other town for whatever unknown period until that high priest died.
That's what I was just trying to put together. What did the high priest have to do with it? But I guess that's...
There would be a lot of people hoping for his death.
Yeah.
Although with I say that based on how we see things in America, but back then the penalty would have been so harsh that the number would have been a lot fewer.
Yeah.
Because here in Leviticus, it's saying basically the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If you take human life, you're put to death, and you were to stone. He said the people were brought if any spoke to the people of Israel, and they brought out of the camp the one who cursed and stoned him with stones. So they didn't do it in the camp; they would have done it on the outside, kind of like what they did with Jesus. They put on the cross on the outside of the city. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. These cities of refuge illustrate our salvation in Jesus Christ, to whom we have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope set before us. Hebrews 6:18. But they do so by contrast. The man who fled in Israel did so because he wasn't guilty of murder, but we flee because we are guilty and deserve to be judged. Nobody has to investigate our case because we know we have sinned and deserve God's punishment. In the case of the cities of refuge, the innocent man was allowed to live, but in our case, Jesus Christ. Let me go back. In the case of the cities of refuge, the innocent man was allowed to live, but in our case, Jesus Christ, the innocent one, was condemned to die. The Israelite had to remain in the city of refuge, for if he left it, he might die at the hand of the avenger. The salvation we have in Christ isn't conditioned on our obedience, but depends wholly on his grace and promises. And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. John 10:28. There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1. The Israelite manslayer could legally leave the city of refuge after the death of the high priest, but our high priest in heaven will never die, and he and ever lives to make intercession for us. Hebrews 7:25. The murderer, verses 11 to 13. But perhaps a man who had murdered his enemy would flee to a city of refuge and lie to the elders, telling them that he was innocent. If it was up to the elders in his home city to set the record straight, it was up to the elders in his home city to set the record straight by sending to the city of refuge and bringing the man back to his native city. The elders in the city of refuge would extradite the accused so he could be properly tried and, if found guilty, executed. God expected each citizen to be concerned about seeing that justice was done in the land. It would be easy for the officers in the murderer's home city to let the elders in the city of refuge worry about the case, but that wouldn't promote justice or prevent the defilement of the land. In the nation of Israel, shedding innocent blood defiled the land, and one way to cleanse the land was to punish the offender. Do not pollute the land where you are. Bloodshed pollutes the land, and atonement cannot be made for the land on which blood has been shed, except by the blood of the one who shed it. Numbers 35:33. Murder was one of several capital crimes in Israel. Others were idolatry and sorcery. There's a reference to Leviticus for that. Blasphemy, violating the Sabbath, willful and repeated disobedience to parents, kidnapping, bestiality, homosexuality, adultery, and the rape of an engaged maiden. We don't have this many capital crimes today, but Israel was a theocracy and her laws were God's laws.
Did it give references for that?
Yeah, it has references for all those. Do you want them?
Yeah. So what were these capital punishment?
Capital crimes in Israel.
Okay, hang on. Capital crimes in Israel. Okay, what were they?
Okay, you have idolatry and sorcery. That's Leviticus 20, 1-6.
Okay.
Blasphemy,
Blasphemy.
EMY.
Okay.
Leviticus 24, 10-16.
Okay.
Violating the Sabbath. Numbers 15, 32-36.
Violating Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay.
Willful and repeated disobedience to parents.
Willful and repeated disobedience.
To parents.
Can you imagine parents? Okay.
And Deuteronomy 21, 18-21.
Okay.
Exodus 21, 15-17.
Exodus 21, 15,
And
17.
17.
Okay.
Then you have kidnapping.
Okay.
That's Exodus 21, 16.
Okay.
Bestiality.
Mm.
Bestiality. That's Exodus 22, 19.
Okay.
Homosexuality. Leviticus 20, 13.
2013.
Yes.
Okay.
Adultery and rape of the engaged maiden.
Ah, hang on. ADU.
ULTERY.
And rape of engaged
Maiden.
maiden.
No matter whether she was engaged or not. Anyway,
Yeah.
Deuteronomy 22, 22 to 27.
Okay.
That would be it.
Thank you.
Hey, I've discovered something for myself, and maybe you already caught on to it. Back to the cities of refuge for a minute. So Numbers was written before Deuteronomy, and it was the original ancestors of Abraham that were receiving these laws, and that's when God said their cities of refuge shall be designated for anyone when they arrive in the land. So these were laws for the original ancestors, and then they grumbled so much they had to wander for 40 years. So of course Deuteronomy is taking place when it's the descendants of those original ancestors, and maybe they were only actually then given 3 cities of refuge,
Hmm. Well,
because
that would make
these
sense
are
because Moses set up one side, Joshua set up the other. So that would make sense, Kim.
That's a
Yeah.
good point, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have this many capital today, but Israel was a theocracy and his laws were God's laws. To break the law was to sin against the Lord and defile the land, and the people needed to understand the seriousness of such actions. In 1972, the United States Supreme Court declared capital punishment unconstitutional, but then reinstated it in 1976. Capital punishment may not restrain every would-be murderer from taking a life, but it does magnify the preciousness of human life as well as honor the law. Although what we call capital punishment.
Well, interesting too, because capital punishment is I'm guilty of doing something against you, Kathy. Okay, so I'm guilty of doing something against your family. You're the blood, you would be the one to throw the first stone to kill me. That would create a whole different set of circumstances because a lot of people want to punish people, but they want someone else to carry it out. They don't want to.
Even for capital punishment, I mean, in all honesty, how often do we ever use it? And I know that's a big issue, this whole capital punishment thing, but maybe we wouldn't have as much going on if there were actually consequences to pay, other than the fact that you get to live in jail and have free TV and 3 meals a day and go to school and get a degree
And sue if you're not treated well while you're in jail.
Yeah.
Well, and look how long they're on death row, 20,
Yeah.
30 years. It's ridiculous.
And meanwhile, we're all paying the price for it.
I mean, they can just appeal and appeal and appeal until they die, and so they just die a natural death. Not saying maybe prisons.
Is that why we pay the attorneys all these fees to keep them from getting justice?
It's just like the other systems in our world. It's a big circle of who can get the money off of this misfortune. I'm looking here. I'm like, okay, idolatry and sorcery, that would take care of a lot of issues. Blasphemy, that would take care of. Was it Kmart that first started having the blue light special on Sundays? You know what I mean? Like we don't respect the Sabbath the way we used to. Guess that's a personal conviction though. And then the willful and repeated disobedience to parents, like that would kick a lot of this behavior we have today out. Oh, and look at that homosexuality that we now are celebrating in some denominations.
Yeah.
We've really gotten far away from.
Well, and even like where the adultery and the rape, heck, you can't even say rape because, first of all, you probably asked for it, and it just, it's
Well,
like
it's that mentality of, and this is just a whole nother thing for me, like I'll try not to go off on, but I feel like for me, as a child growing up basically in a bar room with my parents, I always saw the responsibility of men's penises put on the woman. Instead of the men having to be responsible for their own behavior and them leading and them being respectful and them being kind and all the things that they are supposed to be as male leaders, that transferred to women. Now, I feel like in humbleness, we do like have a responsibility to be modest and all of that. But I just always, like, growing up, there was what word I want, the responsibility was always transferred to the woman. It was your fault.
Mhm.
If you wouldn't have done this, if you wouldn't have let him on, if you wouldn't have been a tease. However, these men also are the same men that are like Google eyeing over other women besides their spouse, besides their wife, besides honoring the person that God gave them, which makes the wife then feel like she has to look a certain way so the husband stays happy. Again, the responsibility being put on her. I just have I have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
Do have a responsibility, yes, to be the godly wife that God's called us to be, but the men also have a responsibility. And these men could take a woman and rape her, even if she was engaged. Like, yes, there should be a responsibility there for them.
That was all I have through 13.
Mine's very short, so I'll go ahead and get it in. There were numerous regulations covering every aspect of life that Moses wanted to review with the Israelites before he sent them over the Jordan into Canaan. These chapters cover a wide range of them, beginning with his command to establish 3 cities as refuge cities, and then he refers to Numbers 35 and Joshua 20. A person who committed manslaughter could flee to one of these cities and be safe from the victim's who was bent on revenge. Moses then offered an example of someone causing an accidental death without harboring any previous hatred towards that person. By having the 3 cities spaced throughout the land, Israel allowed the person who committed manslaughter a city of refuge within a close enough distance that he could get to it before being overtaken. By contrast, I guess if someone were chasing you and you got to that altar and got a hold of that stone, that would be a big deal. Because that could be the case for some people. By contrast, someone who had clearly hated his neighbor and killed him in cold blood was to be given no refuge. That person was to be put to death in order to purge from Israel the guilt of shedding innocent blood. And that took me actually through 13. So we'll stop there for today. Any other thoughts? It's Friday again.
The only thing that I have was the Avenger, the one who was was the nearest male relative to the person killed.
The Blood Avenger?
It just says the Avenger in parentheses was the nearest male relative to the person who was killed. It was his job. He was the family protector. Cindy, don't let me forget to give you your pen tomorrow.
Okay, honey.
Maybe that's what we need, an Avenger again, the family Avenger.
We do. His name's Jesus.
Yeah. All right,
everybody have a great weekend.
This concludes our study. Have a great weekend.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Love y'all. Bye.
Everybody.